Well, look who we have here.
There are a few remnants of original inhabitants on Mars. There's even some indications, which I've been looking into, and I've gotten some data that
Well, look who we have here. You humans.
Esto es Tercer Milenio, un programa de periodismo de investigación con las noticias que están cambiando la historia. Hace algunos meses, una cámara del robot Curioso en Marte pudo captar en diferentes ocasiones a una esfera que parece moverse frente a este rover en la superficie de Marte. Son al menos 8 fotografías donde aparece la esfera. No se ha podido de alguna manera explicar, no se trata de un píxel caliente, no se trata de algún tipo de efecto en la cámara. Es muy similar a las esferas que observamos constantemente aquí en la Tierra. Por tanto, se trata de una evidencia inteligente en el planeta rojo. Fernando Correa.
En esta investigación le presentaremos una esfera luminosa en Marte que fue observada moviéndose muy cerca del robot Curiosity. Se trata de 8 fotografías en las que aparece este no identificado que nos muestra la posibilidad de que en Marte existan esta clase de esferas de luz que algunos investigadores llaman orbs. También en el último mapeo de la superficie de Marte, las imágenes de alta resolución revelan la presencia de una posible antigua ciudad en ruinas. Un rectángulo perfectamente trazado que posiblemente representa el trazo de una ciudad que ahora estaría semienterrada en las arenas de Marte. Comenzando con las fotografías que muestran una esfera luminosa en Marte, esta secuencia originalmente en blanco y negro fue obtenida por la Hazard Cam a bordo del robot Curiosity durante el Sol 527 de esta misión, fecha que equivale al día 29 de enero del 2014. Durante 15 minutos la esfera aparece en 8 tomas diferentes, como si estuviera recorriendo la superficie de Marte, como si estuviera investigando lo que está haciendo el Curiosity. La NASA no ha dado explicación alguna de estos fenómenos. No se trata de un píxel caliente o un punto en la imagen. Tampoco es el efecto de un rayo cósmico porque está cambiando de lugar. Estas son imágenes únicas entre las miles de fotografías del Curiosity. Una evidencia significativa de una esfera que posiblemente escanea el lugar, como las esferas que en la Tierra han sido observadas cuando se acercan, como si investigaran qué es lo que hacemos. El 19 de octubre del 2007, en la Ciudad de México, el Skywatcher Arturo Robles Gil captó cuando esta esfera se acerca a los edificios y luego se eleva y se va. También en Rusia, el 3 de marzo del 2006, una esfera con movimientos controlados se acerca a una ventana. Observe con atención.
Смотри, как интересно, что это за шарик такой?
НЛО, может быть?
Да какие НЛО? Разве бывает НЛО? Смотри-ка, он двигается, да?
Ну вот. Я тоже сниму.
Ух ты.
Все это в очередной раз подтвердило информацию спецслужб.
En el caso de enero del 2014 y la esfera luminosa en Marte, reiteramos que no fue videograbada, sino observada a través de una secuencia de 8 fotografías. El hecho de que va cambiando de posición hace evidente que durante 15 minutos permaneció recorriendo esta zona. Y existen otras imágenes del robot Curiosity en las que aparecen esta clase de esferas en Marte. Observe. El 20 de junio del 2014, a las 13 horas y 8 minutos y 4 segundos, la cámara de navegación captó esta esfera luminosa. Luego la esfera cambia de lugar. Después de 31 segundos, es captada en la segunda imagen. Ahora observe en esta comparación cómo la esfera cambió de posición. Otra evidencia de una posible esfera que observa cerca del Curiosity. En otro de los recientes misterios de la exploración marciana, aquí una evidencia en fotografía de una posible ciudad en ruinas en Marte. Observe. En julio del 2014, Estados Unidos dio a conocer la compilación de las mejores imágenes que hacen el mejor mapa de Marte de la historia, como nunca antes lo habíamos conocido. Es el archivo de las mejores imágenes que incluye esta toma de la sonda orbital Mars Global Surveyor. Observe con cuidado. La imagen muestra la superficie irregular de Marte. No obstante, también registra la presencia de este rectángulo que muestra un trazo muy exacto como para ser una formación natural. Posiblemente se trata de una construcción artificial. Tal vez se trata de vestigios de una antigua civilización en Marte. Otra evidencia que nos habla de un tema muy antiguo, la posibilidad de que en este planeta haya existido una civilización. Y que ahora mismo posiblemente una inteligencia controla esta clase de esferas inteligentes en Marte. Informó para Tercer Milenio, Fernando Correa.
My name, as I said, was Paul Hellyer. I'm a former Minister of National Defence for Canada. I served in 3 governments during a total of 23 and a half years as a Member of Parliament. Although as Minister of National Defence, I had sighting reports of UFOs. I was too busy to be concerned about them at the time because I was trying to unify the Army, Navy and Air Force into a single Canadian Defence Force. And that itself was a kind of battle to the finish. So this was not high on my agenda. But about 10 years ago, I started getting interested due to a young man from Ottawa sending me material on the subject. I told him I was too busy to read it, but he had confidence that someday I would. He sent me a copy of Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. It took me a while to get around to reading it, but I took it for my summer reading in 2005 and was really impressed with what was contained in it. And what I thought to myself is there are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And so after confirming the contents of the book with a retired United States Air Force general, I accepted the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort, Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally. Since then, I've learned a lot from many sources, including a number of the fantastic witnesses that we have heard these last 4 days. They were so outstanding, I was just really blown away with them, the amount of information that was available. And I appreciate every single one of them. But because I'm not a ufologist, I'm a politician, there are only a few things that I want to add in that particular realm. First is that about in the 1960s sometime, it was a flotilla of UFOs headed south that crossed into NATO territory in Europe. And the Commander-in-Chief of the Supreme Allied Headquarters in Europe was naturally very shaken. Fortunately, or maybe divine providence, before the panic button was pushed, the flotilla turned around and headed back north. Obviously, they had thought maybe they were Russian, and they were very concerned about it. Anyway, the investigation was launched into this whole subject, and a document was prepared which concluded that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years. And this is my own view at this stage as well. So, except for that, there are just a couple of things that we've talked about that I'd like to refer to. And one was that we were referring to them as they until this morning when Linda Moulton Howe, I think she was the first one, actually named 3 different species. I have brought my latest book called Light at the End of the Tunnel, A Survival Plan for the Human Species, as an aide-memoir, and I name 5 different species here. I'm aware of more now. As a matter of fact, I saw a document just a few days ago that mentioned 20. And I think you, Mr. Chairman, were interested in some of the places they might come from. And I have in here Zeta reticuli, R-E-T-I-C-U-L-I, reticuli, the Pleiades, Orion, Andromeda, and the Altair star systems. So I don't think we can any more refer to them as they, because they're not an amorphous mass. They are different species and consequently may have different agendas. I don't think we can say that they all have the same agenda any more than we could say that the United States, China, and Russia had the same agenda. Our real interests may be very similar, but as of now, our perceived interests are still quite far apart. One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers. And I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time, and at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin, but after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs in Nevada. And these tall whites were living on United States Air Force property and working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with them. He wrote a book, incidentally, called Millennial Hospitality. There are 4 different versions, but Paula says that Millennial Hospitality number 2 is the best. I think that's the one I read, and it's a very interesting read if you want to sort of get inside the problem of what it's like to bump into these people floating across the terrain in the desert. Well, enough on that for now. My interest is in full disclosure. And my only caveat is I think probably I would say 95 to 98% full disclosure. I know of 1 or 2 things that I'm not sure should be in the public domain, at least yet. They will be someday, I'm sure, but not maybe immediately. But just as children survive the idea of the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus when they become adult, I think that tax-paying citizens are quite capable of accepting the new and broader reality that we live in a cosmos teeming with life of various sorts. The fact that some other civilizations are more advanced than we are may be humbling, but that could be a necessary step in our survival.
Well, look who we have here.
There's actually plenty of water on Mars. Check this out, people. Curiosity's latest discovery should pour water on any reservation you might have had about our inevitable move to Mars. In a game-changing turn of the red planet viability for human exploration and settlement, the plucky rover has found that Mars has practically unlimited supplies of water. Turns out the surface soil on Mars is 2% water, meaning every cubic foot contains around 2 pints that could be extracted to help sustain Earthling pioneers. For me, that was a big wow moment. Laurie Leshin of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institution in Troy, New York, who led a study of Curiosity's first major soil analysis, told Space.
What's up for April? Mars at opposition, a lunar eclipse, and April's Lyrid meteor shower. On April 8th, Mars reaches opposition in its nearly 2-year orbit, when it's directly opposite the Sun in our sky. This year, Mars will be closer to Earth than it has been since 2007. Mars rises in the east in the early evening and is visible all night long. The viewing will be best a little after midnight, when the red planet reaches its highest elevation. Some of the famous dark markings and possibly the polar cap will be visible, even in a small telescope. The next Mars oppositions happen in 2016 and 2018, when Mars will be even closer to the Earth and will appear even more impressive in the telescope. A lunar eclipse will be visible to everyone in North and South America and the Pacific on April 14th and 15th. On the East Coast, the eclipse begins at 12:53 a.m. and ends at 6:38 a.m. If you just want to catch the total eclipse, set your alarm clock for 3 a.m. on the East Coast and midnight on the West Coast. The total eclipse will last an hour and a half from beginning to end. Familiar constellation Lyra rising in the northeast at 10 p.m. It'll be high overhead by 4 a.m. This month's Lyrid meteor shower peaks on the nights of April 22nd and the morning of April 23rd, but you'll spot some Lyrids any night between the 16th and the 25th. The peak rate is expected to be 15 to 20 meteors per hour. The third quarter moon rises an hour past midnight, brightening the sky, but the moon will only obscure the fainter meteors. Luckily, the Lyrids are known to produce bright meteors, many with persistent trains. If you're under a dark sky, you can't miss the beautiful River of Stars near Lyra, a spiral arm of our Milky Way galaxy.
Began here at the Kennedy Space Center, Florida, last summer. A pair of spacecraft, Viking 1 and Viking 2, were readied for their separate journeys to Mars. Each is really 2 spacecraft in one. A 5,000-pound orbiter with cameras and communications gear, and sealed inside 2 saucer-like capsules at the other end, the Viking landing craft. A camera-equipped automated biological and chemistry laboratory and seismic station, which has been purged of earthly organisms by being heated in a huge oven. The 11-month, 420-million-mile trip for the two Viking orbiter landers was set in motion by two launches. One in August, one in September. Earth shrinks smaller and smaller as the two Vikings head toward their Martian rendezvous. Then, braking rockets fire on command, slowing the first Viking explorer enough that it goes into orbit around Mars. For the next 2 weeks, the orbiting spacecraft will survey the surface below, transmitting pictures of possible landing sites to scientists on Earth. The Martian surface should be a study in contrasts. From vast, dust-swept plains to immense canyons and frost-covered plateaus, huge gullies and channels photographed by earlier Mariner spacecraft are believed to have been caused by running water sometime in the distant past. If all goes as planned, the first Viking lander will separate from the orbiting command ship and descend to the Martian surface, landing at 9:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, July 4th. The second Viking is scheduled to land on September 4th, 1,000 miles to the northeast of Viking 1. How will Viking go about looking for life on Mars? We asked Dr. Richard Young, NASA's Chief of Planetary Biology.
We look for life on Mars in much the same way we would look for life on Earth if we were forced to use an automated device. We don't send a scientist along. If we were sending a little wagon out into the Sahara Desert or one of the dry valleys of the Antarctic, which had to function all by itself with automated equipment, this is probably exactly what we would send. And let me say, by the way, that we're looking primarily for microorganisms. It would be rather fruitless of us to look for horses on Mars. We wouldn't look for horses on Earth if we were looking for life, because the chances would be 1,000,000 to 1 against finding them with a random search.
Viking's mechanical arm pulls in a scoopful of Martian soil and drops it into a 1 cubic foot box that's really 3 completely automated testing laboratories. It is here that the possibilities for or against the presence of life will be determined. What will it mean to Earthlings if life is found on Mars?
It must mean that the universe is literally an inhabited universe with many planets that have life on it. Now, if there are many planets that have life on it, there is no doubt at all that terrestrial life is not going to be the most advanced civilization, the most highest level of consciousness. We must be somewheres in the broad spectrum of possibility. And that drives you to the conclusion that there may be conscious life elsewhere in the universe.
Vikings to Mars and the search for life there. This country's first close-up scientific exploration of the red planet.
Mars 1 will establish human settlement on Mars in 2023. In that year, the first group of 4 humans will land on Mars. Every 2 years after that, another group will join the settlement.
My first impression was that this is an extraordinary project by people with vision and imagination. But my first reaction was, I think like anyone who will be confronted with such an idea, this will never work. But now look and listen more closely. This is really something that can be achieved. I think this might become a most spectacular media event ever, watched by everyone on the globe.
1972 was the last time that humans walked on the moon. No human has ever gone as far as Mars. Mars 1 has designed a mission that is much simpler than previous designs for Mars missions. The most significant simplification is that the crew is actually going to stay and live on Mars with the intention to remain there for the rest of their lives.
We will finance this mission by creating the biggest media event ever around it. Everybody in the world can see everything that will happen in the preparations and on Mars.
This is going to be a media spectacle. Big Brother will pale in comparison. the whole world will be watching and experience this journey.
Mars One paid visits to major aerospace companies around the world. In these meetings, they confirmed to us that they can supply the required equipment. For every component, we have at least one potential supplier. All these suppliers have written letters of interest for Mars One.
As for financing, this is going to be a private enterprise. Only private firms are going to contribute. No political mumbo-jumbo, no taxpayers' money will be involved. Only people like myself and many others who are enthusiastic about the program will contribute.
This is the plan. In 2016, a communication satellite and a supply mission will be sent to Mars. In 2018, a large planetary rover will be sent to Mars. It will drive around on Mars to find the best location for the settlement.
In 2020, living units, life support units, a rover, and more supplies will be sent to Mars. The rovers will prepare the settlement for human arrival. They will extract the inflatable section from the living unit. The life support unit will prepare the outpost for arrival of the humans. The crew will depart in September 2022, when the settlement is fully operational and habitable. They will be flying to Mars in a transit habitat with a lander attached to it.
7 months later, in April 2023, the humans will land on Mars, the next giant leap for mankind.
This project seems to be the only way to fulfill humanity's dream to explore outer space. It is going to be an exciting experiment. Let's get started.
Mars One invites you to join us in this great adventure. For more information, visit mars-one.com.
A dust devil the size of a terrestrial tornado towers above the Martian surface in this late afternoon springtime image of Amazonas planitia. Also captured by the context camera on MRO, the length of the shadow indicates the dust plume reached a height of 20 kilometers above the surface. Despite its gargantuan height, the plume is only 70 meters in diameter, giving it a snake-like appearance that is twisted by high-altitude winds. Now, what would happen if you were caught in its path? Because the density of Mars' atmosphere is so low, even a high-velocity dust devil is unlikely to knock you over. However, you might be blasted by any sand or dust particles carried along by the dust devil, and that might frost the visor of your spacesuit quickly if you were caught outside by this monster.
Okay, here we are. This is the big one. And I'll show you the mod in a minute. But right here, we have total freaking proof that there are plants on Mars. Like I said, this is not as voluminous as the other one, but we have plant leaves. The cast shadows are right out here in the open. They're well up above the rock. This is the best I've ever seen. This is the best evidence I've ever seen, because it's a very clear, totally unequivocal photo. Alright, if you're going to if anyone is going to tell me that's rock, then you are mentally ill. I'm sorry. You've got to, there has to be some kind of standards here. Standards of decency, standards of honesty. And despite the dogma, I cannot possibly translate this into anything but a plant.
Yes, I'm Dr. Alan Kozlov from Toronto, and I believe I may have found a second possible phenomena, structure, whatever you want to call it, on Mars, not too far from the original base that was found. Anyway, I have the coordinates as, and I'm not very good with this, so please forgive me on this, 62 degrees, 52 minutes, 34.85 north, and 0 degrees, 19 minutes, 19.29 degrees east. And I've put them up pictures here on the YouTube. I have been searching the area, and they're not far from each other, but I searched the area below the 4-kilometer altitude because it's very hard to see below 4 kilometers. They look very similar, and the size, the first base was about 187 meters long. I estimate this one at 294 meters long. So let's keep looking for these phenomena, and this one looks very similar to the first one. So let's keep going, and I think we might find more. I'm trying to figure out what the heck it is. It's fascinating, and I'm going to keep looking every day. You can see that from the picture here that they look very similar with the markings, the color, the sections, and so let's keep going, guys. Don't let the government try to tell us that this isn't anything, because I think it's something. And we'll be in touch.
Crossing over another with vertical stripes, and we can see the vertical ones plainly through the horizontal ones, indicating, of course, that they do cross one another, but they're translucent. The light does pass through them. Here's an interesting case of a tube where a boulder has come in and smashed it. And what happens when the tube breaks? Well, we see that the white bands are very pointed and spindly, possibly giving the impression of sharp and needle-like. And this is lying flat on the ground, and there are exactly 2 of these for every one of these, because since it's lying flat on the ground, you get the underside as well as the top side that's visible to the eye. So when you break a tube and flatten it on the ground, that's what it looks like. And the same thing has happened down here. This is a flattened portion of the tube from this rock, but this is an intact portion, and there you see the transition between the two. We see that in many cases the tubes have right angle junctions and network, and here's a case where there's some sort of a terminus where many tubes from different directions come together. We don't know what the glassy tubes are, but we certainly would like to know more. This is an artist's concept. Anything with coloration added to these images from Mars Global Surveyor has to be an artist.
It's January 1, 2015, and this is the first Mars weather report last week on Mars. Here we will analyze the past week of weather as recorded from orbit from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and the data from the MAVEN mission as it becomes available. MAVEN entered orbit on December 8, 2014 and is now fully into its science phase at Mars. The Solar Energetic Particle Instrument has already observed significant solar activity both in the form of flares and coronal mass ejections from the Sun to Mars. MAVEN also generated a map of Mars's ozone layer from the lower atmosphere and has now provided a view of the escaping atmosphere of Mars, showing the loss of atomic oxygen, atomic carbon, and atomic hydrogen. In fact, the atmospheric pressure on Mars is so low, any water that percolates up to the surface turns to vapor and is rapidly blown away into space by the solar wind. With all this loss of atmosphere, we should start rethinking the idea of terraforming Mars. Not likely. Mars has an atmospheric density of 1% of the Earth and has no general geomagnetic field. Earth has a field that extends 10 Earth radii in the direction of the Sun and provides an ample bow shock and general field region that protects life here from all but the worst solar storms. The Mars Express mission by ESA revealed that Mars only has bubbles of magnetic fields dotting the surface and provides a vastly different interaction with the solar wind and mass ejections that has made us rethink the locations of landing and habitation sites on the Martian surface. But let's have a look at last week's weather as seen from orbit from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. Last week on Mars, there was no increase in solar wind speed and there has been no coronal mass ejections that have reached the Martian environment for over a month. When we see them on LASCO, we will start following their progression out to Mars. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter recorded common characteristics for this time of the Martian year. The large dust cloud over Iona and Serenium, generated from the local storms along the seasonal south polar cap, continued to spread westward early in the week before dissipating by week's end. Short-lived localized dust storms were observed in Chryse, Salus, Serenium, Cimmeria, Assidius, and the Phalegra Montis. High-altitude clouds occurred frequently near Eos, Chasm, and Valmerneris, and northeast of Hellas. Water ice clouds associated with the North Polar Hood continued to be the predominant weather feature over the northern plains, with an occasional lee wave cloud, known for their ripple-like appearance, were observed on the eastern side of topographic highs, craters, and ridges. The southern extent of the polar hood stretched over Acidalia, Deuteronius, and Utopia. Afternoon conditions in Valmerneris were hazy. Both rovers Curiosity and Gale Crater and Opportunity on Meridiani Planum experienced storm-free afternoon skies throughout the week. The bizarre Martian magnetic field densities to the west of the Tharsis region provided some protection from the ongoing solar wind streams that reach the Mars orbit and are evidently affecting the unprotected surface regions with greater severity than the magnetically protected region. Seen here from the ESA Mars Express mission, the bizarre auroral display was imaged once the spacecraft entered orbit and revealed the field regions in the area southwest of the Tharsis Shield region. As previously discussed, these bubbles of magnetic fields may be the only possible locations offering protection from solar radiation from manned missions to the Red Planet. They apparently moderate weather as well. The field directions, nanotesla intensity, and regions have been well mapped at this point, as seen in this projection. The strongest is about -60 degrees south latitude and 180 degrees east longitude, seen here in the magnetometer map southwest of the Tharsis region, about midpoint between the Hellas region and the Argyll quadrangle. The nanotesla strength field direction map shows the strongest magnetic field strength is centered at -45 south latitude, 180 east longitude. This is a likely site for the highest level of long-term habitation protection on Mars. Unfortunately, none of the American rovers currently on the surface are in this area and cannot directly monitor radiation effect comparisons. On the LASCO video over the time period, we see no coronal mass ejections as the sun is pretty quiet, but we can also watch the ISWA record of the interplanet Enlil spiral showing directed energy as a strong flow increasing intensity of solar wind. Mars has a 95% carbon dioxide atmosphere and only reaches 70 degrees Fahrenheit at the equator in the middle of the summer, so atmospheric carbon has little, if anything, to do with atmospheric heating. On Earth, heating occurs by solar input, then carbon increases. If it was the other way around, the global warming gang would have an argument. They don't. Just like on Ben Davidson's Suspicious Observers site, it's the sun affecting planetary atmosphere, not carbon. There is no petrochemical industry on Mars, and the Martians aren't driving cars and operating coal-fired plants. And Mars is in a deep freeze most of the time. Pollution is the problem on Earth, not carbon, and we agree with Ben. It's the same on Mars as on Earth. Only the sun can significantly change a planetary's atmospheric temperature. So here are some shots of the rovers operating on the surface to close. It's the 3,191st day of the mission since orbital insertion of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. It's winter in the Northern Hemisphere, and solar noon at Mount Olympus. See you next week with another Mars weather report from the ongoing data stream from orbit. We will be adding the MAVEN data as it becomes publicly available, but in the meantime, keep looking up and out there.
Said, quote, "The evidence seems to be building that we are actually all Martians, that life started on Mars and came to Earth on a rock. Is this science fiction or is there truth to this theory?" Out front tonight, Bill Nye, the science guy. He is the executive director of the Planetary Society and here to help us sort it out. Well, this definitely sounds bizarre, but apparently you think this is a legitimate theory.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely a legitimate theory. You see, we find meteorites land on the Earth's surface that are clearly from Mars. There's ways to do this. You look at the impact pattern on the rock, and you get these bubbles of gas from the Martian atmosphere. Because we find amino acids in meteorites, people have wondered, because these amino acids survive in deep space for centuries, for millennia. People have wondered for several years, a couple decades, if it's possible that life started on Mars when Mars was very wet and ended up here on Earth and we were all descendants of some Martian microbe. It sounds, I mean, I'm the first to say it sounds just extraordinary and almost crazy, but it's quite reasonable.
If science now shows that our lives started on Mars, this would be a pretty significant development, wouldn't it?
It would utterly change the world. It would change the world the way Copernicus changed the world when we found out the Earth goes around the sun instead of the other way around. It would change the world when Galileo discovered that there are moons around another planet. It changes everything.
If he's right, are we all Martians?
It's very reasonable. I mean, it's very reasonable. But if he's right about the chemical process, that doesn't necessarily mean that we started on Mars, but it means that it's reasonable that maybe life started on Mars. Man, if we could go somewhere near the equator of Mars on a summer Mars day and look at some slushy, super salty ice and find molybdenum dioxide-enabled Martian microbes, it would change the world. And there's one way to make sure you never find them. And that's to not go looking. It's so inexpensive, everybody. I'm telling you, this is a worthy pursuit.
Bill Nye, the science guy, thanks so much.
So people, you all heard what the scientists say? It is inexpensive for them to go to Mars to find out the truth. But nobody wanted to go looking. People, why wouldn't they want to go looking? You know why? Because it's the greatest secret they want to keep from us. Okay? That some people here on Earth amongst us are aliens. Not all of us are. But some of them are. Okay? I ain't calling no names, but some of them are. They don't belong here on Earth. But anyway, the point is, people, we all know that.
This is a picture from the new Mars rover Curiosity. And interestingly enough, it's sending back video that's showing objects moving on the horizon, and large objects there 1 minute and gone the next. Okay, now when we look at the following video, we want to look at this area right here for a moving object going upwards, and then after that there's another object moving across the horizon in the direction of that arrow. So we want to watch for both of those. And I'll play the video coming up now. Okay, hopefully you're able to see this and didn't get lost in the upload. See the object going from bottom to top? It starts right at the edge of the horizon. Okay, now here is the other object that goes all the way across. These are really small in the video, so you have to look closely, and hopefully the quality didn't get lost in the upload. That's what I'm hoping. There's definitely something moving, and they're moving really fast. I'll get a close-up here now. Hopefully you can see it better. Really interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch this camera. I hope you all are safe. Godspeed. I'll talk to you all again soon.
You said that Egyptian civilization looks as if it just appeared
out of nowhere
from a legacy somewhere else.
Out of nowhere, just out of the blue. Suddenly, 1 minute they're making relatively humble, simple structures, and the next minute they're building something like the Great Pyramid.
Well, this gets into the fact that the capital city of Egypt, of course, is Cairo. And what does the word Cairo mean?
Well, that means Mars.
Right.
It means Mars.
So now, as we go into that, people who might have been with you up until this point, now we've gone even further into the fringe. But what is your feeling of connection between Mars and...
My work all the way along the line has been work of synthesis, bringing together the research of many people who work in this field. And I was absolutely intrigued by Richard Hoagland's work on Mars and on the monuments of Mars, and I felt that it was worth considering that seriously. And the book The Mars Mystery, which again Robert and I wrote together, does look at this. Now we are not necessarily advocating an extraterrestrial origin to ancient Egypt. We're saying that something interesting is going on, and let's look at all the evidence. My side of the Mars Mystery was to look primarily at the evidence for cataclysms in the solar system. It seems that the planet Mars, possibly quite recently, was hit by a devastating cataclysm. Something ripped off half of the crust of Mars and just lost it. I mean, something absolutely catastrophic happened there. It's quite possible that something equally catastrophic could happen to our planet when you look into the issue of near-Earth asteroids and long-period comets whizzing around the solar system at vast speeds.
And people may not understand that there are some undeniably strange, gigantic structures on the surface of Mars. There's what they call the D&M pyramid for Vincent de Pretro and Greg Molinar. And it's a 5-sided pyramid, very clear, unambiguous, absolutely a pyramidal shape in a pentagon kind of formation.
I was very impressed by the D&M pyramid, very impressed by the work that Richard Hoagland and others have done on that structure and on the whole Cydonia setup. Very impressed by the face on Mars. Now, we all know that NASA came out with photographs which made the face on Mars look like, what was it they said?
A cat box.
A cat box. I have to say, I don't think I'm alone in this. I just don't totally trust everything that NASA say and do.
Well, there's lots of pictures where you see a really nice plateau and it's just shaped all the way around, and then the face is sitting on top of it and it's got 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. It's all symmetrical.
Exactly. I think we were the subject of a disinformation campaign at that point. For some reason, the powers that be seem to want us not to think that there may be artifacts, the work of intelligent beings.
Well, and it's a human face too.
And it's a human face. I know. It's extremely intriguing, extremely interesting, and very, very hard to explain. First of all, we have to fight our way through the vast mass of disinformation that has been generated on this subject, and maintain our curiosity at least for what on earth was going on Mars, and what the origin of those structures might be, and why they contain huge amounts of recognizable geometry, some of which is found in monuments on Earth as well. I don't claim to have an answer to this. The book's called The Mars Mystery because it is a mystery, but what Robert and I wanted to do in that book was to synthesize all the available data on the subject and present it to the public so they can make up their own mind.
You found some hard empirical connections between the geometry on the Giza Plateau and the geometry on the Cydonia Plateau on Mars.
I have to. This is not my work. Right. We are synthesizing the work of others in this respect. And again, I would refer you to the voluminous work of Richard Hoagland for the details on the geometry. I don't want to speak of what Richard Hoagland himself should be speaking of. There's evidence for very, very curious similarities. And the whole, again, Richard Hoagland, the whole 19.5 degree thing when you come to Teotihuacan in Mexico, sitting at 19.5 degrees north of the equator, and the presence of pyramids on that site. My feeling is there just is something that hasn't been properly explained to us. I find it very frustrating. I find it very annoying. I still think that the face on Mars is a face. I'm not at all convinced by the material that NASA put out there.
Sure.
And I think we are going to get to the truth on this sometime in the future. Now, are we dealing with an extraterrestrial civilization? Are we dealing with a human civilization that somehow got to Mars a very long time ago? Who knows? Who knows the answer to that question?
Right.
I don't have anything against extraterrestrials. I think the universe is full of life. I actually think that's what the universe is for. I think it's a home for life, a home for experience. But I haven't found it necessary in my work to go down the ancient astronaut route. Particularly, I've preferred to look at the mystery of a possible lost human civilization. But once we buy into that, once we accept that we may be a species with amnesia, that we may have forgotten glorious and dramatic aspects of our past, then we have to consider the possibility that there might even have been a spacefaring civilization on this planet. Did it come from this planet to this planet from elsewhere? Did it go from this planet to somewhere else? I don't know the answer. My job is to spell out the mystery and then let people work.
Well, and you found.
When one takes the images and turns down the brightness but increases the contrast, geometric patterns appear on the crater floor. It has been argued that these patterns are JPEG artifacts enhanced by the contrast and brightness adjustments. But the patterns on the floor of hail appear exactly the same with respect to the topography in all three images. We can perform a quick study of this around a feature I will call the spade. The spade is here outlined in blue. And next to the spade we have the flag with two airplanes flying overhead. Behind the flag we have the anti-aircraft gun shooting at the two planes. Over the anti-aircraft gun we have the dialogue box for the gunner, who's screaming something like, "Get some!" And off to the right we have a J for JPEG artifact. In the next image, the area of the spade is upside down, so we'll flip it 180 degrees, and we can see the flag, the anti-aircraft gun, the dialogue box, and the J for JPEG artifact. And finally, the third photograph. The flag, the anti-aircraft gun, the dialogue box, and the J. Since JPEG artifacts cannot appear the same in multiple photographs taken of the same area from different angles, the skeptic's argument must now become one of three-dimensional rendering. In a three-dimensional rendering, all of the relative heights of the surface features are mapped in a colorless plane. A single photograph of the area in question is then applied to this plane. Multiple images can be rendered from different angles of the area in question. This argument requires that a single original photograph be used in all three of the ESA's images in order to explain the consistency of the image artifacts. The game now becomes one of finding the differences as opposed to the similarities in the images of hail. In this area of the crater floor, the geometric patterns appear very blurred. However, in this photograph we can see that there is no such blurring. Three-dimensional rendering can cause blurring of the image, but this happens where the topography changes the greatest and not on level terrain. A second difference in the photos is found here. In order to give some context, we will mark the hills surrounding the anomaly. The red hill, the green hill, and the three rocks. Here is another flag, and the area of interest is in the center. This we will call the silo. And in the second image, the area of the anomaly again will be marked with the red hill, the green hill, the three rocks. The flag is seen, and the silo. However, when we reach the third photograph, problems start to occur. The red hill, the green hill, and the blue rocks are all still present and accounted for. The flag is still nicely in place, but the silo is now absent without leave. A third example of how the images differ is found here. This group of rocky outcroppings makes a nice arrow that points to the green ridge line across the valley. The anomaly in question is this dark S-shaped feature. In the west-facing image, we also have the arrow pointing to the green ridge line and the S feature right where it should be. Once again, we have discrepancies when viewing the third image. We have the arrow, the green hillside, but the darkened S feature is no longer visible. If we all assume that the ESA is on the up and up, then these three examples prove that the three ESA images cannot be three-dimensional renderings based on the same original photograph. It follows that if the three ESA images cannot be based on the same original photograph, then what the skeptics have called JPEG artifacts cannot be JPEG artifacts. They must be an accurate representation of what is on the ground on Mars.
There are a few remnants of original inhabitants on Mars. There's even some indications, which I've been looking into, and I've gotten some data that we're playing host to a bunch of Martians here on this planet.
Well, look who we have here.
I know it sounds crazy.
Nibiru slams into Tiamat. It is a little more held together. It's older, and so it is coalesced more. It holds together. Tiamat is shattered in two, blown apart, torn in half. And that the lighter outer crust, the crust with the water on it, is scattered in all directions. Boom, just an explosion, the lighter crust, and goes off with the water. Now, one of the great mysteries of modern-day astronomy is comets. Comets make no sense for this reason. They come from all over the place. In a linear universe, when, the great ball of a primordial cloud of dust and gas swirling around flattens out into a pancake to make the solar system, that's the ecliptic. Everything formed in the ecliptic should be in the ecliptic. Nothing should be out of the ecliptic, and yet comets come from all over the place. So they had to be removed out to where they are some kind of way, but we don't have any idea. So they come up with this fantastic thing called the Oort cloud, which is so far away you can't imagine. The Oort cloud is one of the biggest jokes out there. And that's how they explain comets, because they can't explain them any other way. But the problem with comets is they have water in them. And anything out in space is not going to produce water. You produce water by being a cooling planet with lava spewing up the steam and stuff like that, and it condenses, etc. So comets have to begin in a planet. Now, this explains it, I think, plausibly well. Nothing that they will throw at you to explain comets will do it. All right, number two, the other great mystery, the asteroid belt. What they say is that the inner viscous magma inside Tiamat in the collision was strung out the bowels of the planet. The guts were ripped out and strung out and broke into little pieces. That's the asteroid belt. They called it the hammered bracelet. We call it the asteroid belt. But there it is. And that's a fairly plausible explanation for it. Again, this doesn't make sense because, as you heard, the exploded planet theory. Problem is, when a planet explodes, it ought to just go boom everywhere. It shouldn't be hanging around. Doesn't make sense for a number of reasons. Okay, now, the third one is Pluto. Pluto's a problem because it's, as you've all been hearing lately, they're trying to downgrade it. It doesn't belong. It doesn't fit. It has an orbit that's not like the others. It carries inside the orbit of Neptune, and it's 17 degrees off the ecliptic. Again, nothing should be off the ecliptic. What they say is that Nibiru, as it swung around, it pulled Pluto away from Saturn, its original home, and dropped it out where it is now. Now, all astronomers know Pluto is not a natural planet.
Well, look who we have here. You humans. Well, look who we have here. You humans. You humans are going to be extinct. You will be no more. And the reason why is because the human race has become a parasite on this earth, and you must pay. You will pay dearly for everything that you touch. Either becomes dead or dissected because you want to experiment and see what is inside, like the curious little parasites that you are. Your day is near. Your day is so close that it's making my mouth water as we speak. Yes. A lot of people call me a gargoyle, but I am known as the DIA Demon. You can find me at the Denver International Airport coming out of a suitcase, in which one of the locks says D and the other one says R. What does it mean? Well, these are clues. These are clues for a certain number of people to survive. And deep below DIA, there is chambers for your pathetic human race to survive what is coming. Your day is near. Your day is so close that it's making my mouth water as we speak. They say you are what you eat. Do I look human to you? Yes, I didn't think so. So do know in the coming months I will give you clues. Clues for your survival. Clues that you can either take with a grain of salt, or you may take it and try to survive. I think I smell a human cooking somewhere. Oh, it smells so good. Remember what I said. Remember what I said. Only a few of you will survive.
Ahora observe en esta comparación cómo la esfera cambió de posición. Otra evidencia de una posible esfera que observa cerca del Curiosity. En otro de los recientes misterios de la exploración marciana, aquí una evidencia en fotografía de una posible ciudad en ruinas en Marte. Observe. En julio del 2014, Estados Unidos dio a conocer la compilación de las mejores imágenes que hacen el mejor mapa de Marte de la historia, como nunca antes lo habíamos conocido. Es el archivo de las mejores imágenes que incluye esta toma de la sonda orbital Mars Global Surveyor. Observe con cuidado. La imagen muestra la superficie irregular de Marte. No obstante, también registra la presencia de este rectángulo que muestra un trazo muy exacto, como para ser una formación natural. Posiblemente se trata de una construcción artificial. Tal vez se trata de vestigios de una antigua civilización en Marte. Otra evidencia que nos habla de un tema muy antiguo, la posibilidad de que...
Well, look who we have here.
There are a few remnants of original inhabitants on Mars. There's even some indications, which I've been looking into, and I've gotten some data that
Well, look who we have here. You humans.
Esto es Tercer Milenio, un programa de periodismo de investigación con las noticias que están cambiando la historia. Hace algunos meses, una cámara del robot Curioso en Marte pudo captar en diferentes ocasiones a una esfera que parece moverse frente a este rover en la superficie de Marte.
La Hazard Cam a bordo del robot Curiosity durante el Sol 527 de esta misión, fecha que equivale al día 29 de enero del 2014. Durante 15 minutos la esfera aparece en 8 tomas diferentes, como si estuviera recorriendo la superficie de Marte, como si estuviera investigando lo que está haciendo el Curiosity. La NASA no ha dado explicación alguna de estos fenómenos. No se trata de un píxel caliente o un punto en la imagen. Tampoco es el efecto de un rayo cósmico porque está cambiando de lugar. Estas son imágenes únicas entre las miles de fotografías del Curiosity. Una evidencia significativa de una esfera que posiblemente escanea el lugar, como las esferas que en la Tierra han sido observadas cuando se acercan, como si investigaran qué es lo que hacemos. El 19 de octubre del 2007, en la Ciudad de México, el Skywatcher Arturo Robles Gil captó cuando esta esfera se acerca a los edificios y luego se eleva y se va. También en Rusia, el 3 de marzo del 2006, una esfera con movimientos controlados se acerca a una ventana. Observe con atención.
Смотри, как интересно, что это за шарик такой?
НЛО, может быть?
Да какие НЛО? Разве бывает НЛО? Смотри-ка, он двигается, да?
Ну вот. Я тоже сниму.
Ух ты.
Все это в очередной раз подтвердило информацию спецслужб.
En el caso de enero del 2014 y la esfera luminosa en Marte, reiteramos que no fue videograbada, sino observada a través de una secuencia de 8 fotografías. El hecho de que va cambiando de posición hace evidente que durante 15 minutos permaneció recorriendo esta zona. Y existen otras imágenes del robot Curiosity en las que aparecen esta clase de esferas en Marte. Observe. El 20 de junio del 2014, a las 13 horas y 8 minutos y 4 segundos, la cámara de navegación captó esta esfera luminosa. Luego la esfera cambia de lugar. Después de 31 segundos, es captada en la segunda imagen.
Son al menos 8 fotografías donde aparece la esfera. No se ha podido de alguna manera explicar, no se trata de un píxel caliente, no se trata de algún tipo de efecto en la cámara. Es muy similar a las esferas que observamos constantemente aquí en la Tierra. Por tanto, se trata de una evidencia inteligente en el planeta rojo. Fernando Correa.
En esta investigación le presentaremos una esfera luminosa en Marte que fue observada moviéndose muy cerca del robot Curiosity. Se trata de 8 fotografías en las que aparece este no identificado que nos muestra la posibilidad de que en Marte existan esta clase de esferas de luz que algunos investigadores llaman orbs. También en el último mapeo de la superficie de Marte, las imágenes de alta resolución revelan la presencia de una posible antigua ciudad en ruinas. Un rectángulo perfectamente trazado que posiblemente representa el trazo de una ciudad que ahora estaría semienterrada en las arenas de Marte. Comenzando con las fotografías que muestran una esfera luminosa en Marte, esta secuencia originalmente en blanco y negro fue obtenida